Three leaders of modern nations born from ancient empires. Around a table in Tehran, they planned the future of a country whose leader was not in the room. As the presidents of Russia and Iran patted themselves on the back for a job well done keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power, Turkey's leader reminded them that the mission was far from accomplished.
We do not want a bloodbath in Idlib, and we expect you to support us in this regard. A decision which we reach in relation to the fate of Idlib will also shape the future of the region.
Much of the Tehran summit was spent talking about the future of Idlib, the Syrian city and province where armed groups and opposition rebels are preparing to make their last stand against Syrian government forces and Russian warplanes. For the underwriters of the Syrian conflict, Idlib is clearly a point of divergence. Iran and Russia see it in national security terms. The Syrian government needs to regain control of the city to combat what it calls terrorism, as well as asserting national integrity. Turkey, already home to 3.5 million Syrian refugees, sees Idlib in humanitarian terms. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the majority of men, women, and children there are not fighters and have suffered enough, and that Turks can't cope with millions more fleeing Idlib. Iran's president acknowledged that the vast majority of people in Idlib are civilians.
Idlib is sensitive because terrorists use civilian people as human shields. They hide themselves among people to continue their shameful lives. We should try to separate terrorists from people, fight terrorists, and protect civilians in this area.
But if Iran's leader held the middle ground, Russian President Vladimir Putin, whose military involvement turned the war in Assad's favor, has a different view. If armed groups are willing to use civilians as human shields, he said, what happens next is their fault.
Terrorists do the same thing everywhere, all the time. They use human shields. The Russian military always tries to spare civilian lives.
Soon after the Tehran summit ended, the United Nations peace envoy for Syria warned the Security Council that any battle for Idlib would be horrific and that the time has come to evacuate the city. Throughout the day, leaders in Tehran discussed a future Syria free from terrorists, with new buildings, a new constitution, and even elections, while leaders in New York were left to weigh the potentially disastrous consequences of what seems like the inevitable battle for Idlib. Zein, Basravi, Al Jazeera, Tehran.